We begin this morning with the top Democrat on the Senate Intelligence Committee, Virginia's Mark Warner. Good to have you here.
Thank you, Margaret.
I want to talk about elections and security. Back on January 28th, the FBI went to Fulton County, Georgia, and seized ballots and 2020 voting records linked to the presidential election. The director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, then was spotted outside the elections office, and she argued that her presence there had been personally requested by the President of the United States, and she had broad statutory authority to coordinate, integrate, and analyze intelligence related to election security. What would justify her involvement? Is there any foreign nexus that you have been informed of?
We have not been informed of any foreign nexus. The job of the Director of National Intelligence is to be outward-facing about foreigners, not about Americans. And remember, many of the reforms that were put in place actually took place after the Watergate scandal under President Nixon, where a president was directly involved in certain domestic criminal activities that appeared with the Watergate break-in. And my fear in this case is it almost seems Nixonian. You know, if the president asked Gabbard to show up down in Georgia on a domestic political investigation, first of all, how would he know about the search warrant even being issued? That's not his job. And then to have the director of national intelligence down there, which is totally against her rules, unless there is a foreign nexus. And she has not indicated any foreign nexus to us to date.
There's been no communication with the committee whatsoever on this issue?
We have asked.
Okay.
We then subsequently found that this was not the first time she was involved in domestic activities. She went down and seized some voting machines in Puerto Rico earlier in the year. Again, we had no knowledge of that. And then the question of what she was doing in Georgia, there's been 3 or 4 different stories since it broke. First, she said the president asked, then the president said he didn't ask her, then he said it was Pam Bondi, the attorney general. So we don't have the slightest idea, other than the fact that the whole thing stinks to high heaven. And the fact is, Donald Trump cannot get over the fact that he lost Georgia in 2020, that he lost the election in 2020. My fear is now he sees the political winds turning against him, and he's going to try to interfere in the 2026 elections, something that a year ago I didn't think would be possible.
I mean, that's a tremendous statement. But just to clarify here, it was Reuters that first reported that Gabbard went to Puerto Rico back in the spring to seize voting machines. Was Congress informed at all, or did you learn about it in the press? I
believe the first we ever heard about this was from the press itself.
Wow. So you've laid out that the intelligence agencies usually focus overseas, but the White House is arguing that the director was there for good reason, and that federal law, they argue, assigns the DNI statutory responsibility to lead counterintelligence matters related to election security, election voting system risks, software, voter registration databases. You're concerned, but are your fellow Republicans on the committee concerned about this?
Here's the ironic thing, Margaret. Many of the protections for our election system were put in place during the first Trump administration. We set up CISA, the cybersecurity agency, to help work with state and local elections. There was an FBI center set up for foreign influence. And then we put into law something called the Foreign Malign Influence Center at the Director of National Intelligence Office. All of those entities have been basically disbanded. CISA cut by 1/3, the FBI center cut back, the ODNI's center cut back, which we think is frankly counter to the law. But it's all, in terms of the ODNI, has to be involved of foreign involvement. There has been no evidence of that to date.
Where is Chair Cotton on this, though?
We have jointly been making sure that we get updates on election security. And I think we're going to see more of that to come, because this is critical. And my concern is that when we see artificial intelligence tools and others, it was almost child's play what happened in 2016. China, Russia, Iran, others could be interfering. We've not seen evidence to date. Gabbard, if she's got any evidence, should have provided it to the Congress. I think this was an effort where Donald Trump can't get over the fact that he lost Georgia. So obsessed, and it begs the question is, what was Gabbard doing there? And it frankly begs the question is, why was the president even aware of this investigation before the search warrant was issued?
Well, we would love to put those questions to the director and have asked to do so. But now that you are here, can you just button this up for me? Because we're talking about 2020, and that's what Fulton County focus was about. But you also said you think in 2026 there's an effort to interfere. What evidence do you have of that?
This was what I'm seeing from the president's own comments about nationalizing elections and putting Republicans in charge, counter to the Constitution. We've seen these activities in Georgia where could there be some effort that suddenly gives him an excuse to try to take some of these federalization efforts. We've seen ICE. We focused a lot of this activity on ICE in terms of their going rogue in Minneapolis. But there is a very real threat without reforms at ICE that you could have ICE patrols around polling stations. And people would say, well, why would that matter if you're all American citizens?
Yeah,
well,
non-citizens cannot vote.
Because we've seen ICE discriminate against Latino families. We've seen as well mixed families where someone may be legal and others not. And candidly, you don't need to do a lot to discourage people from voting. And we've more recently seen ICE starting to use technology where they can get information about Americans. Recently, there was an individual in Minnesota that got denied a global entry card to get through TSA quicker because he or she appeared at a protest rally. Do we really want ICE having that information?
Is that what you just said?
Hypothetically, that was what happened in Minnesota. Hypothetically, if ICE is getting information and you've got an unpaid parking ticket, would you go vote if you've got an unpaid parking ticket thinking that an ICE patrol might be at a polling station? This is uncharted territory, and yet you've got the president's own words in many ways raising concerns because he says, well, gosh, we Republicans ought to take over elections in 15 states.
We're going to talk about some of that and the operations at the local level with David Becker, our elections expert, ahead in the show, and the immigration reform. But I want to ask you about what's going on with Director Gabbard, because there was a whistleblower who filed a complaint against her personally and offered to come to Congress to share the information, according to the attorney for this whistleblower. This is about a complaint that 2 inspectors general, one of them Biden era, concluded had a non-credible nature. You've viewed a redacted version of the complaint, as I understand it. Do you accept their conclusions?
Well, first of all, the previous inspector general, who'd been a long-term professional, viewed it as credible. The new...
Which of the 2 complaints?
The original, I can't talk about the contents of the complaint. I'm old-fashioned, it's classified. And the complaint is so redacted, it's hard to get to the bottom of. I got additional questions. My concern with what the director did is that this information was not relayed to Congress. There is a process. And we, and I mean we, the Gang of 8, didn't even hear about the complaint until November. We only saw it in February. And we've got this complete contradiction where the then lawyer for Director Gabbard said he shared the responsibility she had to share this with Congress in June, the legal responsibility. She later stated that she was not aware of her responsibility. Ignorance of the law is not an excuse if you're the Director of National Intelligence.
Well, as I understand it, because when it's deemed non-credible, it is not necessarily an urgent concern that starts a time clock that would force
a ruling
Congress
of urgency by the first Inspector General. That was contradicted by the Trump Inspector General. But the process was still ongoing. The fact that this sat out there for 6, 7, 8 months now, and we are only seeing it now, raises huge concerns in and of itself.
Well, I know you said you will not share what the intercept in the intelligence was about or the complaint itself, but CBS has been told by a senior intelligence official the whistleblower complaint included reference to an intelligence intercept between 2 foreign nationals in which they mentioned someone close to President Donald Trump. U.S. intelligence did not verify whether the conversation itself was more than just gossip. Will you be able to speak to the whistleblower? Will you be able to see this underlying intelligence?
My understanding is the whistleblower has been waiting for guidance, legal guidance on how to approach the committee.
Does a whistleblower still work for the U.S. government?
I don't have any idea.
Will you be able to view the intelligence, the intercept itself that she's accused of not sharing?
We are trying to get both the redactions and the underlying intelligence. And that is in process. I'm not going to talk to the content itself, but this whole question, remember this whistleblower came forward in May. It's now February of the following year, and we're still asking questions.
Tom Cotton, the chair, says he's comfortable with the process to date, but on the
I am not comfortable with the process,
Yeah.
the timing, and I can't make a judgment about the credibility or the veracity because it's been so heavily redacted.
Well, the director is frustrated with you personally and issued this really long, blistering statement saying you have repeatedly lied to the American people, that the media also lies, and that she never had the whistleblower complaint in her possession and saw it for the first time 2 weeks ago, I guess the actual hard copy. So do you care to respond to this accusation that
I would
that you are lying?
respond that I do not believe that Director Gabbard is competent for her position. I don't believe that she is making America safer by not following the rules and procedures on getting whistleblower complaints to the Congress in a timely fashion. I believe she has been totally inappropriate showing up on a domestic criminal investigation in Georgia around voting machines. I think she has not been appropriate or competent in terms of, frankly, cutting back on investigations into foreign malign influence, literally dismembering the Foreign Malign Influence Center that's at the Director of National Intelligence. And we are going to agree to disagree about who's telling the truth. And I believe her own general counsel, who's now her deputy general counsel, testified this week that he shared with Director Gabbard in June her legal obligations.
Well, the NSA has released a statement saying that they are abiding by the law. We do invite Director Gabbard on this program. Before I let you go, I have to ask you about Iran. There have been a number of think tanks who have published photos of what they believe is evidence of Iran reconstituting and rebuilding its nuclear program that the U.S. bombed 8 months ago. Are they rebuilding?
When we struck Iranians' nuclear capabilities, our military did a great job. It was not totally obliterated. So that standard the president himself set. And Iran, has been indicated in public documents, is trying to reconstitute. What I fear is that we don't have the ability to bring the full power of pressure against Iran. A few weeks back, when the Iranian people bravely were in the streets, and there might have been a moment, we couldn't strike because the aircraft carrier that was usually in the Mediterranean was off the coast of Venezuela, doing the blockade there.
On top of
that as well, we were unable to bring the full force of pressure of our allies in Europe against Iran because at that very same moment, President Trump was disrupting NATO with his Greenland play. We are stronger when we use our allies, when we have our full military capabilities in region, and that military is getting stretched. As good as we are, as the president gets engaged in activities all over the world.
You support the diplomacy underway now?
I support the diplomacy, absolutely.
All right. Senator Mark Warner, thank you for your time today.